Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So usually on Budget Magic, we're playing decks that I brewed up myself, but every once in a while, there's an exception, and this is one of those weeks. So a little while ago, a $24/11 tick deck went 5-0 in a competitive standard league in the hands of Tulio Jondi. So big congrats to Tulio on a really sweet deck, and that is Mono Blue Reservoir, and I'm super excited to try this deck out, even though I didn't build it myself, because I've wanted this deck to be good for so long, and it's been so close to being good. The problems with Aetherflux Reservoir haven't been that the card or the deck isn't good enough or powerful enough. It's been that it hasn't lined up right with the format. In a format with Aetherworks Marvel, it's hard to play a turn 5 combo deck when everyone else can play a turn 4 combo deck, plus everyone's playing Artifact Hate to beat Marvel, which you pick up on. But now that Marvel's gone, the floodgates have opened, everything's possible, and we can have a competitive $24 Mono Blue Reservoir deck in Standard. So I'm really excited. I've wanted this deck to work for so long, and it looks like it might finally be the time. So a quick reminder before we break down Mono Blue Reservoir for Standard. If you enjoy this deck and you enjoy Budget Magic in general, it would be amazing of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So, Mono Blue Reservoir is built around Aetherflux Reservoir. This is our payoff, and we're basically this really weird storm deck in Standard. So, Reservoir is both a storm enabler and a payoff. So, every time we cast a spell, we gain a life, and then if we can pay 50 life, so we gotta get above 50 life, we can deal 50 damage to our opponent. So, this is the plan of the deck. We're going to cast a whole bunch of spells, and then probably pick up those spells, recast all those spells, really cheap artifacts for the most part, and get up over 50, and then we just kill our opponent. It takes about 9 spells in a turn, depending on exact life totals and situations, but somewhere around there to just kill our opponent on the spot with Aetherflux Reservoir. And Aetherflux Reservoir is so important, we got a bunch of ways to dig for it. So War of Invention is really key to the deck. If we don't have a reservoir and we're ready to combo off, it finds us a reservoir for a pretty cheap price because we can tap all of our artifacts to tutor it up. And if we do have a reservoir, we can get our other important pieces, something that draws us a card, something that helps us produce mana. Gluttonous Crane also does double duty. On one hand, it helps us dig for our Aetherflux Reservoir. On the other hand, we can usually cast it for 1 mana, and then we can bounce it back to our hand, cast it again, keep upping the storm count on our Aetherflux Reservoir. So, Aetherflux Reservoir is the key. It's our only realistic path to winning the game. So, as far as enabling the reservoir, we have a couple of free artifacts, so we can just cast these, generates the storm count, gains us life with reservoir, and then we're going to pick them up, cast them again, pick them up, cast them again, and that combo kind of wins us the game. One of the tricks is, in the early game, unless we have something to do with them, like we're tapping them to improvise or something like that, there's really no reason to run them out on the battlefield and risk them getting killed, unless we're worried about our opponent somehow taking them from our hand or we're discarding the hand size. So just hold on to these because they're so much better when they're generating storm count with Aetherflux Reservoir. As far as our 1 mana artifacts and 2 mana artifacts, we got a couple of different options. Implement of Improvement and Renegade Map, they help us cycle through our deck a little. The life gain on Implement is not completely irrelevant. Sometimes we end up 2 life short. Plus it draws us a card. We don't have any white lands in our deck, but we can make white mana with Prophetic Prism. So Prophetic Prism, really key. It's our most direct draw a card artifact. So it draws us a card, helps us find something else to cast and generate even more storm count. It's good when we bounce it back to our hand because we cast it and draw even more cards. And then it helps us produce the white mana we need for something like Implement of Improvement if we find ourselves in a situation where we need to do that. So the other key piece of this deck is Inspiring Statuary, which gives us a way to cheat on mana. So it doesn't generate mana for our artifacts. It can only help us cast non-artifact spells, but it lets us tap all of our random Bone Saws and Ornithopters and Prophetic Prisms to cast a couple of really big combo pieces. So to really go off with this deck, and it's possible to win without Inspiring Statuary, but most of the time, we want an Aetherflux Reservoir. The next piece we're looking to tutor up with our War of Invention or draw into with our Gluttonous Crane is the Inspiring Statuary, because it lets us cast our big payoffs. Paradoxical Outcome in Baral's expertise, and it lets us cast them for 1 or 2 mana. So we tap our random artifacts, and then cast our Paradoxical Outcome for 1 mana or Brawl's Expertise for 2 mana, and these cards are what really let us win the game. So we don't usually have enough cards in hand where we can cast 9 spells in a turn without having a way to draw more cards, but Paradoxical Outcome and Brawl's Expertise really fix this problem. So Paradoxical Outcome is the best of the best. It is kind of the third piece of the deck. Piece 1 is the Reservoir, Piece 2 is Inspiring Statuary, Piece 3 is Paradoxical Outcome. We can cast it for 1 mana with Statuary, we pick up all of our Ornithopters and Bonesaws, and not only do we get those back in our hand, so we get to recast them, but we also draw a card equal to the number of permanents that we bounce, so we're usually drawing 5, 6, 7 cards, and we get to recast all of our 0 and 1 mana stuff to generate even more storm count, and it just wins us the game. Brawl's Expertise is kind of the backup Paradoxical Outcome, only a 2 of. It has the upside that we can cast it, bounce something, and use it to put an Aetherflux Reservoir or Inspiring Statuary into play for free. But most of the time we're bouncing our Ornithopters, bouncing any of our cheap artifacts, maybe bouncing something of our opponents if we're in danger of dying. It's a way we can help stay alive by bouncing a big threat our opponent has on the battlefield, and then casting more spells to keep gaining that life and trying to combo off. The last pieces of the deck are Reverse Engineer, which is just a brute force early game card draw spell. I mentioned normally we want to hold onto our Ornithopters and Bonesaws. One of the exceptions is if we have Reverse Engineer, we can cast this as early as turn 2 with the right draws. If we just Ornithopter, Bonesaw, play 2 islands, tap it, draw 3 cards, and that's a very powerful effect, but it just helps us dig through and find our real combo pieces, or if we have our combo pieces, to draw more cards, to keep casting, to up our storm count and win. Engulf the Shore is another double duty card. Primarily, it's to help keep us alive against our opponent's stuff. So our opponent gets a huge board of creatures. Maybe we have our Inspiring Statuary. We can cast it for 1 mana, bounce all our opponent's stuff. It buys us a turn or 2 to keep casting spells, gaining life, trying to draw into our Paradoxical Outcome. So that's plan A. Plan B is it can work like a combo piece. If we find a lot of our Ornithopters, we can Ornithopter, bounce all our Ornithopters with Engulf the Shore, Ornithopter, and that gains us, just by itself, almost enough life to kill our opponent with our Aetherflux Reservoir. Mana base, super simple, 18 islands. Remember, we do have the 4 Renegade maps, so it's kind of like 22 lands, because if we need a land, we can get it with Renegade map. If we don't need a land, Renegade map sits out, we can bounce it with Outcome, and so forth. In the sideboard, we got a bunch of stuff for fighting through controlling decks, so the easiest way for our opponent to beat our deck is either to counter or kill our Aetherflux Reservoir. If we don't have a Reservoir, it's really, really hard for us to win. We're pretty much on Gluttonous Crane beatdowns, which is not going to get it done 99 times out of 100, but this helps make sure that doesn't happen. Negates, dispels, counters, counterspells, counters, Dissenters, Deliverance, and so forth. Metallic Rebuke takes advantage of all of our artifacts, can be a 1 mana leak if we can tap some artifacts, and then we have some more defense. If our opponent's playing aggressive creature decks, we can bring in more Engulf the Shores and Brawl's Expertises to kind of fog our opponent by bouncing their stuff, helping us stay alive while we're digging through our deck to find our combo pieces. And the last pieces are Commit to Memory and Vexing Scuttler. So these give us ways to get back things from the graveyard. If we're worried about a control matchup and our stuff getting countered, Commit gives us this release valve where we can shuffle everything back in, including hopefully our Aetherflux Reservoir, so we can try again to combo off. Vexing Scuttler gets back a Paradoxical Outcome or something like that. So we have a couple of interesting options there. It's very expensive, so you're only really bringing these in if you expect a really grindy, counter-heavy control matchup. Is the only time I'd consider playing these cards. And that is Mono Blue Reservoir for Standard, and that's our budget Magic deck for this week. So I'm actually really excited for this deck. I think it's pretty sweet. I think it's been sweet for a while, but I think the format might finally be in a place where this can compete, because, like I said, the problem before is Aetherworks Marvel was just faster, and everyone was playing main deck Dissenters, Deliverances, and stuff to fight against Aetherworks Marvel, and that just naturally fights against Aetherflux Reservoir as well. But now we got Mardu vehicles and zombies and decks like that, where if we can just kind of fog them once with an Engulf the Shore, we can combo off before they can kill us, and they don't have good ways, for the most part, of interacting with our deck, especially before sideboarding. So we're really planning on winning game 1, and then hoping that when our opponent brings in more discard and counters, we can get the right draws and the right sideboard cards to win at least one of the two post-sideboard games and win the match. So that's kind of the plan. Most importantly, $24. Like, that is as cheap as it gets. That is ultra budget range. Usually we call $50 ultra budget, and this is less than half of that and 11 ticks on Magic Online. So not only competitive, but just absolutely dirt cheap. So I think the deck is sweet. I'm really excited for it. Anyway, let's get to the gameplay videos. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, take a second and click that like button down below. It's a great way to help support the channel for free. And you can find the next video in the playlist right here.